All right, what's up? What's up? Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, back live for, I guess, the first time this week. Chris did a bunch of them last week, and I think we've had some pretty good feedback. So excited to be back on here and excited to talk some Gamecock football, and really excited for the pads to go on. Chris, I think you always hear coaches throw in that caveat early on in camp when they're talking about, it could be anything. It could be a competition. It could be a guy that's stood out to them. It could be just really anything about the team. And they'll go back to that line of, well, the pads aren't on yet. It's not, it's not real football yet. So South Carolina on Monday, we're recording this. We're live on Tuesday if you're watching it later on. They've now had two full padded practices, which means they kick off as they do every year with the best named drill in football, the cock drill, which is their version of the Oklahoma drill, and try to bring some physicality. So I think, Chris, first and foremost, and by the way, he's Chris Clark, I'm Wes Mitchell, GamecockCentral.com, here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We believe, hopefully everything's working out there. But I've sort of looked at this offseason, Chris, as like an offseason of stepping stones, basically. And it's like, okay, we're one step closer. And the pads are on. Everything seems to be fine and good as far as, COVID goes and all that stuff within the program. Everything's moving forward. And the Gamecocks are marching towards a season. And now we're getting to that point where we're actually sitting right there about a month away.
Yeah, man. I mean, things are rolling along nicely, it seems, as far as we know, and everything's progressing. Towards we sort of wondered or knew in the back of our minds that when football started, there had to be sort of this waiting period of, okay, how are things going to go? We've seen at some other places across the country, whether it's classes moving online only or some workouts being paused. It hasn't happened as far as workouts here. Everything's progressed normally, which is good. And it seems like there's really been a commitment to doing that. Will Muschamp's talked about that, having a sort of a boring life away from football, insulating themselves a little bit. And it appears, based on what we know so far, that they've done that. But yeah, I mean, they're through now 6 practices. Like you said, a couple of padded practices. Will Muschamp spoke after several of those practices. There's appeared, from what we've heard from him, to be some things that he's liked, some things that he has not liked. Probably no huge surprises yet in that way. And we've certainly heard some things on our own behind the scenes as well. But things are continuing to roll, and it's getting each day that passes, man, we get closer to the 2020 season.
Yeah, getting a little bit closer, as you said. And there's been, like you said, I wouldn't say surprises. There's been some things we've picked up that I would say there's been developments, but no real surprises is maybe the way I would put it. Had a question, and of course, this is the Gamecock Central YouTube, but we are also based obviously off of GamecockCentral.com, and have a question here and we always try to go to our subscribers first, from Beham GC, who wants to know, Chris, what are we hearing about Josh Vann or Joe Anderson? And, I'll tell you, among the young defensive linemen that have been talked about quite a bit so far, I've been a bit surprised that we haven't heard a little bit more about Joe Anderson. I don't know about you, but I know early on, you look back when he arrived at South Carolina, we were told, man, this guy's got some juice, and basically pass rush juice off the edge. It's the guy that can make some plays, has some just natural ability, maybe even more so than South Carolina realized when they were recruiting him, was the thought at the time. Now, you would think with J.J. Enigbare playing a good bit more buck, I get the impression the more they talk, the more, you hear with T-Rob talking last week. I think that's the route they're going right now, is to get Sterling and Enigbare on the field. Could that progress? Could that change? Obviously, yes, but that seems to be the way they're headed right now. So you'd think that would open things up a bit at defensive end behind Aaron Sterling for somebody like Joe Anderson to step in there. And maybe he still could, but it sounds like, if you want to sort of read between the lines, it sounds like Tonka Hemingway has come in and is sort of going to make a push there for that number 2 spot there at defensive end, I think.
It does open it up. I mean, Sterling and Enigbari last year were sort of, I don't even know if they're 1 and 2. It's sort of like a 1A, 1B last year at the end spot. And so it made a lot of sense. It's always been something that our subscribers have wondered, man. It's always been, hey, will Aaron Sterling ever move to Buck? Will Enigbari move to Buck? There was a lot of talk about Sterling doing it. Well, now one of those moves has actually happened to where they're going to put Enigbari at Buck, at least in situations, but probably, for good to get two of their best guys there. And so what that does is it does open up a little bit at end. A guy like Hemingway, a guy like Joe Anderson, to come in at end and play some. So, yeah, we haven't heard as much. I don't know that that's necessarily a negative. I've been a little bit surprised by that too. Sort of like I was surprised at defensive tackle with not quite as much on Rick Sandage, going into his junior year. I don't know if it's necessarily a negative thing, as it's just there's some other guys in preseason that have done some things that have caught some guys' attention. And when that happens, sometimes you hear, hey, watch out for this guy. I think with Hemingway, people have been high on his ability. People have just, I think, even been surprised a little bit maybe about how quickly he picked things up. Now, this is before the pads came on, but still. But Anderson is a guy that, highly rated guy, still a guy that the staff, I think, likes. Haven't heard anything, to the opposite since he got on campus. And so maybe this is an opportunity for him throughout preseason to show what he can do and get on the field. And he's still a young guy. We knew when he got to campus he would need a little bit of development, just maybe reshaping his body, maybe learning how to play a certain position, whether he's going to be inside or outside.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, and we're going to get to the Josh Vann part of that, but I think this is an interesting discussion because I get the impression already, and again, you kind of have to read between the lines and combine it with some things you hear, and it's kind of like you gather a little bit of information here, you gather a little bit of information there, you take the public comments, and then you try your best to take all these ingredients and come up with what's going on. Chris, I get the feeling, reading between the lines, that your pick of Jabari Ellis as being the sleeper, I think that's happening before our very eyes. Like I think, and you'll remember when South Carolina landed Jabari out of GMC, they were extremely high on the kid, and I think there was a pretty steep jump for him making that. Some guys, it's really hard to even to put in the words, but it's really hard to project. Certainly, doesn't it seem like some guys they're just like they just pick it up, and it's like how does that guy go from high school to SEC?
Right.
And it's not necessarily. Sometimes it's a guy who was an absolute star in high school. Sometimes DJ Wanham, for example, just picks it up. Dude's a contributor from day one. Other guys, even coming from JUCO, like Jabari, it's taken a little bit of time to pick things up. But I remember hearing from people, people close to Lance Thompson when they landed him, because he was recruiting him at the time. This is a kid who can get into the backfield, has some quickness for his size, can play multiple spots on the defensive front. They liked his versatility. And then you've heard every offseason, you hear a little bit more, Jabari Ellis is coming on. Jabari Ellis is coming on. Actually started the finale last year against Clemson. I think that gets overlooked a bit. There were some injuries, but to me, Chris, I remember us distinctly talking about, is this going to be a veteran? Are the veterans going to take over at the defensive tackle spot, or are the young bucks going to take over and say, hey, and I put Rick Sandage, even though he's a junior, I sort of still think of him in that category.
Yeah.
But it seems like, reading between the lines, the veterans may be saying, not today, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, Jabari Ellis is, if I'm not mistaken, the first guy out of Will Muschamp's mouth when he's talking about defensive tackles. And that sort of, I think, took some people aback, including me, because you think, hey, is he going to talk about Zach Pickens first or Rick Sandage or, KT, Kier Thomas, who often gets overlooked. A couple really solid guys there with experience. And so you're right about Ellis. I mean, Carolina liked him during the recruiting process, just like they liked Devontae Davis, and he hasn't really had his chance yet due to injuries, and he's just had to come along and progress. And Jabari Ellis originally was slated as an early enrollee in his class. He wasn't able to, had to get pushed back, arrived a little late. So he just had more of a learning curve, and that happens sometimes. But he's someone that they still like, and he's going to have every opportunity. Going through today, and just sort of preparing to write the insider report for Gamecock Central with some sort of behind the scenes team notes that we heard that we published this morning, looking over the numbers at defensive tackle, you go, they've got some guys here, in terms of numbers and talent. They got some younger guys, they got some older guys. So the blend's really interesting, I think. And then, you look outside and Keir Thomas, if they needed to, he could go play outside. And then you look at a guy like Anderson. You wonder, does Devontae Davis, does he go play outside some? Does Tyree Johnson, does he, get a look there? Because they do have a lot of guys inside. And then this defense is multiple, in terms of the types of fronts they can play. So you could see a little bit more situational stuff. They've talked about that even with Brad Johnson at the Buck spot. He's been a Buck during his career, but T-Rob has talked about, hey, we'll play Brad Johnson at Buck in some sub packages and then play him at Sam linebacker other times. So the feeling that we're getting just from talking to some people is they feel like they've got some depth. Do they have a Javon Kinlaw? No. But Javon Kinlaw, these guys, they don't come around every day. They don't come around every year, even at the top programs in the country. He's a unique type guy. So they may not have that one dominant type guy up front, but they do have some guys that are good. And as a collective, they feel like they can be pretty good.
Yeah, so let's get to the Josh Vann part. I think, he's a guy, Chris, that we all know, 4-star kid, came in, played a bit his first 2 years. And I remember talking at USC Media Day last year, Shi Smith being like, hey, Josh Vann's had an incredible offseason. Expectations were very high for Josh to be able to step up, play a big role, and make a lot of catches. I remember watching him at South Carolina's camp just pluck the ball out of the sky effortlessly, like just a natural wide receiver. For whatever reason, it hasn't all clicked in. And, you look at Josh, and he's been banged up a bit. Had, was it a finger at the end of last year? Finger, hand, got injured. I think he was a little bit banged up this offseason as well, trying to get back to 100%. So you had some issues there. And I think it's just going to kind of be one of those things where you wait and see. I think after last offseason, there were some high expectations. He's maybe a little bit of the forgotten guy at receiver right now. But here's the thing: we've seen Muschamp praise the receivers one day. We've seen South Carolina sort of come back and Muschamp say too many drops. So the receiver in general is a work in progress right now. If Josh Vann can take another step forward and show what he did in high school, then absolutely he's going to be a huge part of this offense. It's just a matter of making it happen. He's going to get his chance. It's just a matter, I think, of what he does with it. And certainly is very hard to, I think, predict or project what that's going to look like based on what we know right now.
Yeah, and it's been a little odd with Josh. I mean, year one, he had the shoulder from high school. And so he was a summer enrollee, had the shoulder issue, and still got on the field year one, and did some things where he showed some flashes. There wasn't a huge reason for him to play that year. Still saw the field some despite that. And then last year, man, I just don't know if anybody could have foreseen the slump that he had. And I really don't know what it was for. I mean, the hands, it's not there's certain guys coming out of high school and you worry about their hands and then maybe it plays out in college and it's not a huge surprise if it does. Him, it was really surprising to me because like you said, in high school, the ball skills, it was a plus for Josh Vann. And so is it just sort of a sophomore slump? I don't know. I can't say, just being honest, that we've heard Josh Vann's having this tremendous preseason camp. I haven't heard anything, the opposite of that. But there hasn't been a ton of buzz so far. Is it more motivational? I don't know. I tend to think it falls into the category of just prove it. It's just sort of a prove it year for him and several other guys on the roster at multiple positions, including receiver. But that's a big one because that's one where they really need guys to step up. But with Josh, I still think even last year when he struggled, sophomore slump, but he still made a couple plays every now and then. Last year we go, okay, that's what Josh Vann looks like. That's what they need him to be. So he's just got to get to that level. Generally, the guys who are practicing the best are going to play. But does he step up in preseason camp? Does he make some type of move? And if he gets opportunities in the game, does he take advantage? I think that's the key. If he does, then we'll see him on the field a lot more. But I'm still a believer in the raw talent. It's just a question of whether or not it's going to translate at some point, this season, starting with preseason practice.
Yeah, Chris, I remember watching video of him on the big stage in state championship games in Georgia, plucking the ball out of the air with one hand and getting open. Now, I think one thing, obviously, we know the separation. Getting separation in college is a lot harder than getting separation in high school. Josh, not necessarily a burner or a big guy. So it becomes, I would say, being more of almost like a craftsman about being able to get over or get open, I should say, because, and that doesn't mean that you can't get open. We see guys that just technically are so refined with their route running that they are able to still get open and make plays. So I think with Josh, it's just about continuing to do some of those things. And then maybe if something good happens, the confidence gets up and then it takes off. We're everybody's guilty of sort of giving up on guys sometimes. I mean, I thought about this the other day, Chris. We haven't talked about Randricus Davis at all this offseason. And we did this offseason way back, but I mean, like once campus started, we haven't talked about Randricus Davis. Really haven't heard about him, haven't asked about him either, though. So I'm like, here's a guy who was a 4-star kid, one of the gems of South Carolina's first class there under Muschamp, and someone that comes in, has been on campus forever, played as a true freshman, made some plays as a true freshman, and now just has not been able to get healthy and stay on the field. So, there's some guys to watch at receiver. But, Chris, I continue to hear extremely positive buzz about Jalen Brooks. I thought watching the film that he could be in the rotation this year if he gets the NCAA waiver. From some stuff I've heard, again, it's early, so you don't want to say this is definitely happening. So I'll say it like this. If he gets the waiver, I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Brooks actually ends up getting in that conversation for starting based on the extremely early returns that we're hearing on Jalen Brooks.
Yeah, definitely has ability. Again, that's the big question, man, because, similar to Nick Muse last year, we knew Nick Muse was going to play a bunch if he got the waiver, and I took him beyond that first game that he missed, but he ended up playing a big role until he got injured, and is expected to play a big role this year. So it seems that way with Brooks. There's been a lot of positive buzz. I think, even Will Muschamp has made a point and sort of gone out of his way to let people know that Jalen Brooks is doing pretty well. I think there were some questions about that, obviously, when it comes up, whether it's if you take a guy who's a 2-star recruit or you take a transfer from certain schools. A lot about the Brooks situation mirrors Muse last year. When Carolina took Muse, it was this guy can't play because he's coming from William and Mary. I'll say it like I said before. If you took a roster full of transfers from William and Mary or Wingate, you probably wouldn't win a lot of SEC games. But there are guys that slip to that level who can play. And Muse can. We know that for sure. And it looks like from the early returns, like you said, Wes, that Jalen Brooks can play too. And so he's a guy that I fully anticipate helping a lot potentially if he can get eligible. And so that's the key question.
Yeah, and I've heard really good things there. I heard today there's still, and this is what Muschamp said publicly, so it's not really, new information. But I heard today there continues to be confidence that he will get the waiver. Now, we've learned by now, you always have to put that caveat with the waiver with the NCAA that nobody really knows what's going to happen. And more importantly, nobody knows when it's going to happen. Because as we saw, like you said, man, Nick Muse, he gets the waiver like the week 2. Was that the day of the Charleston Southern game or the day before? I remember tracking, and I think there were some too early reports or Twitter reports that he had gotten it and it wasn't true. I just remember chasing that and having to just blow up people at, hey, is it happened? Because there was reports out there that it had, and then and it was an absolute mess, dude. So hopefully this is a little more cut and dry. I know they're confident, but we'll see. All right, so Patrick on Facebook, since we're talking about Nick Muse, wants to know how is he coming along. I watched the did you watch the Zoom stuff with him last week, Chris, where he was talking about it? He said he's like 95% with the knee. Now, sometimes when you start getting into these percentages, it's kind of he's 100% as far as what he's able to do. Like he's fully 100% cleared. It's just the way he talked. I think sometimes it maybe tightens up on him. Maybe it gets sore on him after a few days, and you have to be careful about. Sometimes you have to get on a pitch count, sort of when or a snap count type thing when you're dealing with something like that. But I would say, Chris, statistically, if you want to start projecting a guy that's going to have a big year, look at the concerns. Like let's do some math. Look at the concerns at receiver, plus the fact that Muse is by far your most experienced tight end, plus what Mike Bobo has done with tight ends at other places, plus the fact that who knows who else is going to catch the football. I don't know if I said that one already. Anyway, it equals Nick Muse being a matchup nightmare already and getting a lot of balls his way.
Yeah, I mean, he's really, really important to this team. Again, even with some guys on the roster last year and less questions overall, not that the offense ended up being consistent enough or good enough overall, but one could argue there were less questions last year, with the experience at tight end and, having Brian Edwards on this team last year. There's a lot of questions on offense. And so Muse is the guy that, even though it's a smaller sample size, feel good about what he's done so far, what he's shown in practice, what he's shown in limited game situations, what he did at his previous stop, even against lesser competition. And you feel good about the physical tools. And so when you look at guys that you can rely on, you feel like that's the guy that you can rely on if you're the Carolina staff. And that's been pretty evident. So I think he'll be significant. You're right. Mike Bobo, he's got a pretty decorated history with tight ends. He's had a lot of good ones. He's had a lot of different kinds of tight ends. He's had big guys. He's had sort of flex guys. Muse, I think, really fits the bill of a guy that can do some of both. He can block. He can certainly receive the ball. He can even make some things happen in the open field after the catch. And so I think he'll be a guy whose numbers called a lot. The other thing, Wes, is even beyond Muse, tight end in general could be big. Mike Bobo said that they've had 2 tight ends on the field a lot. They've even used up to 4. So, I think that's one of the things to look out for is with some of the questions at receiver, did they play more tight ends? Now, they still got some questions to answer there. They got to get that room fully healthy. They got to have some young guys step up and continue to progress. But tight end might be a huge aspect of this offense this year.
Yep. So, all right, we had a question about Marshawn Lloyd. Jason, if you're still watching, actually, I would direct you a couple, I guess, right after the Marshawn Lloyd injury. There's a video on our YouTube that actually, and you're already on YouTube, so just go back to that because we went very in depth about what it means, who needs to step up, and I don't really think there's a whole lot new to be added to that yet. Maybe in a week now that the pads are on, and they're I think going to probably do some scrimmaging on Saturday. So once we get a better feel for that, there may be some more, but I think that's probably your best bet is to go back and check that out. We did have a question that ties into something I thought worth mentioning from last week, but sort of sliding into this week, we haven't talked about a lot, would be the return positions. And I think I was not surprised, but again, I thought it was a development that J.C. Horn, from what T-Rob said, is the person they're just really looking for to take that punt return position and run with it. And sounded like it was something they want for JC to maybe focus in on a little bit more and get more comfortable doing it. He did, line up back there some last year. But now from a skill set standpoint, Chris, I mean, JC Horn is one of the most athletic guys on this team. So I think you potentially have someone who can make some plays there and make something happen. And, it was weird. A lot of people kind of, and myself included, I don't know how much I said it publicly, but in my own, in my mind, I always thought, well, is Brian Edwards the most elusive person to put back there? But then I thought Brian Edwards actually sort of quieted some doubters on that and was really good. Even he didn't look. I think the problem with Brian, he didn't look like your traditional smaller sort of scat back looking punt returner. It's normally a smaller guy, really quick feet, can make people miss in a phone. Ace Sanders is who I think of when I think of like the ideal punt returner. Then you got 6'3" Brian Edwards, but did well. But I think Horn's another person. You just look at the athleticism, the feet, and I think he can excel in that if he does the very first thing South Carolina coaches will always ask of that person, and that's catch the football.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, securing the football. And J.C. Horn, I mean, he's got excellent ball skills. I mean, he could go play receiver, I think, pretty easily. And I've heard his dad was pretty good at receiver as well. So he's sort of got those natural, bloodlines. But, man, when you look at, size and ball skills and, ability to run and cut, JC has all those things. And so it's very important. I mean, you got to find a guy back there who can catch the ball reliably. And then if you can go make some plays and flip the field or even score a touchdown every now and then, make some big special teams plays, that's huge, particularly for an offense that, again, is going to have some question marks. So he's one. I think kick return is very intriguing. Multiple guys back there that are going to audition. I think there's some guys that make sense. Shi Smith makes a lot of sense. Saquandre Wright might make some sense. He has experience from junior college doing it, but we aren't sure yet, how that's going to play out. I won't say we're sure about any of it yet, but J.C. Horn seems like a pretty safe bet on punt return.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that's what they want to happen. And, we'll see. But I think as long as you can get him some room, some space, he's a guy who can make some plays for you there. By the way, if you see the banner, 60-day free trial to GamecockCentral.com, want to invite everybody over. Use the code GC60. If you're not already a subscriber, you'll get 60 days free. And then we think and hope that you'll stick it out and hang with us. Also, we got a code Gamecocks. If you're ready to sign up, just type in Gamecocks in the promo field, and you'll get 50% off your first year if you're not already a subscriber. So, all right, we had a couple of questions about quarterback, and I think that was something we were going to hit on today anyway, because it is a true open quarterback competition, and that means it's always something that people want to hear the latest on. I've been trying to gather info on this, Chris. I think first and foremost, players will speak again on Wednesday. It was very obvious to me when the players spoke last week, Chris, that I think they had been pretty well coached on talking about quarterbacks and, frankly, how not to talk about quarterbacks in the quarterback competition. But from what I've heard, I got a text today that they've continued to sort of rotate Ryan Helinski, Colin Hill. Both have taken snaps with the ones. Both have actually had some really good moments. And both, I think, have done what they need to do so far. But this is a battle that's going to be, I would say, determined in the scrimmages. That's where you ultimately pick a QB. Other than what's out there already, have you heard much of anything on this behind the scenes, Chris?
No, I think you pretty much hit on it, man. They're continuing to rotate guys. It's really been interesting to sort of follow the progression of it all from the time that Colin Hill announced his transfer to South Carolina and just what you hear during those particular times. I mean, we remember when Hill first was brought in as a transfer, we knew and we were told this isn't going to be a guy that's coming in just to chill and hold a clipboard. Like he wants to win the job and he's going to have a chance to win it. Mike Bobo said it the other day during his press conference that he told Colin and he tells everybody that he recruits, you know how I operate. I'm going to play the best guy. And that's the end of story. And so Colin Hill felt like he had an opportunity. Mike Bobo felt like he had an opportunity as well, as does Ryan Helinski. During the spring, Colin Hill was still shut down, rehabbing the knee injury that he had at Colorado State. We heard a lot of things about Ryan Helinski. It seemed at that time that he had a good spring through the only 5 practices they got. He played well, felt good. Colin Hill returned to action, so to speak, in the summer once he was fully cleared and started throwing with some guys. We started hearing more Colin Hill buzz, and we still hear that. There are some people that we have spoken with that are of the opinion, and I'll say that it's an opinion right now that, nobody's ever couched it to me that has been decided. I really don't think it has been. that Hill will eventually win the job. So there is that school of thought out there. And I guess it depends on what day or who you talk to or what it may be. But I do think the most fair way to classify it is still open competition, still rotating guys. As the commenter there has said, Wes, Hill does have more experience in the offense. He knows it extremely well. And so does that end up giving him a leg up? Possibly. But like you said, the scrimmages for this preseason are going to play a big role. You know, who do you trust the most based on practice performances? Will it change during the season even from the game one starter? That's also possible.
Yeah, and I tend to think, Chris, that there's really a lot of reasons it could end up being Colin Hill. When you talk about, I mean, the first thing Nick Muse said was, "Hey, this guy's got an NFL arm," and that matches everything I've heard since he was able to get back on the field and throw this summer. A really sort of that, I would say Colin Hill is that kind of quiet leader, has worked with the receivers a ton in the offseason to sort of get acclimated, build that rapport with them. And not that Ryan Helinski hasn't, but I just think that there was this impression maybe that it was automatically going to be Helinski because he started last year. And with a new quarterbacks coach, a new offense, new everything, and the guy comes in with experience within this offense, that sort of changes the conversation. And Bobo, if you can say one thing about Mike Bobo, is that he was very matter of fact, very honest, pulls no punches when it comes to talking about positions. And you're talking about the receivers. He's like, hey guys, the guys that make plays are going to play. He's like, he's like, if you make plays, you're going to play. Like, it's not about favorites. It's not about recruiting rankings. It's not about even who you like the most as a person, probably. It's about who can go out there and direct this football team. I tend to think that if Ryan Helinski starts September 26th, then that, to me, means that you are going to see some really strong quarterback play from South Carolina, because I think that means he has been forced to step his game up to a bigger level than last year, and that he's going to go out and make some plays for South Carolina, because I think Colin Hill, at the very least, is sort of the baseline. He's the guy that's not going to get you hurt as far as getting into bad plays, getting yourself into bad situations. He knows. I mean, Nick Muse said the comment that stood out to me, Chris, was when he said Colin Hill may know the offense better than Bobo. Now, that's an exaggeration.
Right.
But, these dudes that have come in from Colorado State, Hill and Adam Prentice, who's actually helping the running backs as a coach on the field as well, they have a winner's mentality, and they know the offense. That goes a long way when you're talking about a weird season when you don't know from week to week what's going to be happening around you. And you have a new offense. And I know that this has helped them mentally to have the OTAs, the walkthroughs, and all this other stuff. But the other side of that coin, Chris, is that there is no substitution for actual scrimmage reps, like actual reps in the offense. And that's something that Colin Hill brings to this team.
No doubt. And like you said, what Nick Muse said, that is like an exaggeration just to drive home the point of this guy really knows the offense well. Obviously, Mike Bobo's designing the offense. He knows it pretty well. But, I mean, Colin Hill, he's the one out there executing it. And so a lot of times you hear coaches say, we ask our players, what do you like? What are you seeing? Because they're the ones out there when the bullets are flying, so to speak, out there executing things, and they see things even differently than a coach up in the box or on the field. And so Colin Hill is a guy with experience not only for practice multiple years, but in game situations in Mike Bobo's offense, can be a guy that says, hey, coach, I think this would work, or this isn't working. And so when you take Nick's comment, I mean, it does actually make a lot of sense. It's something that's, it's just meant that he knows the offense, but he's got so much experience with it that he does almost become like a second coach on the field. And that's something that when you combine the arm talent and the knowledge of the offense, that's certainly something that helps him a lot in this race.
Yeah, and Chris, I want to say real quick, what's up to your buddy Adam here? Because generally this would cost people, but I gotta say we gotta give a shout out to Aladias, right?
Oh man, I miss
Adam
it.
he runs Aladias, right? Adam,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Aladia's locations in Irmo and Lexington. I frequent the Irmo location a lot.
you've been
Um,
there quite a bit.
I've been there quite a bit. Took Wes there, so really ready to go back, and I need to do that soon. So I'll
Yeah,
be there.
there's your free plug, Adam. Appreciate you joining, man. Great Italian food in two different spots. And if anybody else wants a lot of mentions on this, we do have ad sponsorships available, but that one's for free for Adam. Maybe I'll get half off my lasagna or something next time. But all right, so let's hit a few more. Robert Prophet has joined us. I know that name. Never called him Robert in my life, but I think Rob had a good point and a good question. More traditional four-man fronts this year. That sort of goes along a bit with the talk about Inigbare. I think we're headed in that direction. Could it change as the year goes on? As I said earlier, Chris, I think the thing that would change that would be that number 3, Jordan Birch, your 5-star, if he sort of just progresses to that point where it's like, okay, guys, what are we doing? We can't keep this kid off the field. Then, Inigbare, if you think back, man, Inigbare, remember he started his career at defensive tackle, playing as an undersized interior lineman. And he's gone the opposite direction. Most guys work their way in. He's slimmed down and worked his way out. So you look at, to Rob's point, you look at the traditional buck in this scheme. Brad Johnson has slimmed down. It sounds like his role is going to be more Chris Sam backer and regular and probably buck, like stand-up edge rusher in pressure package type things, 3rd and long, certain matchups, just certain things you like as far as a team you're scheming up, trying to get a pass rusher free, stuff like that. But regular and nickel, I think you're going to see, when you have regular on the field, that adds to Sam. That's the 3rd linebacker. But I think 4-man front with Inigbare and Sterling on, either side, opposite of each other, is probably the way this is heading. Now, if Birch just comes on as the year progresses, then you can easily switch it back to last year when you had Inigbare and Sterling sort of going, just swapping 50-50. And, injuries. If somebody were to go down at defensive end, you could slide Inigbare over, then Birch slides up and start, there's a lot of different things you can do, but I agree. I think that's the way this thing is headed, just based on what we've heard and what T-Rob has said publicly.
Yeah, no doubt. And, South Carolina's heading into this season with some numbers up front, with some depth. And so what you said, man, is something that I'm really curious to see. Can they stay healthy? I mean, it would be the first time in a while, that this team by the end of the season has had some injuries up front that's hurt them. They've had some guys in the past that have played. You mentioned Inigbare. A lot of people forget that he started his career inside, was not ready to do that, but he's really shown some flashes. Last year, he really took a big step forward, having him and Aaron Sterling on the edge, 2 guys that can play the run, 2 guys that can rush the passer. Then you've got some options inside, and you've got some options, with some other pass rushers or guys that can play on the edge as well. You also have some versatility to play your different fronts. Does Keir Thomas move outside in certain situations? Do you play 2 edge rushers in 3rd down situations? What does Brad Johnson's role become? When do you deploy Jordan Birch out there, depending on how he progresses? So there's some fascinating, I think, storylines in terms of how they can play these fronts. I think by the end of preseason camp, we'll have a good idea of, when they open up against Tennessee, here's probably the 4 guys that are going to be on the field. But I'm intrigued to see some of the sub packages and things that they end up running, in 3rd and short situations and 3rd and long situations. How do they end up playing things there? And I think it's fascinating, and it's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, good stuff, Rob. Appreciate that. I see my buddy Zach is on here on Facebook as well. So what's up, Rob? Zach, I've got a very entertaining Gamecock group chat on my phone with those 2 guys. Some of it probably shouldn't be public, but yeah. So appreciate you guys joining us. And so, Chris, let's move it forward. Muschamp, we'll be talking. Is it tomorrow? That talking tomorrow and Saturday. So we've heard from Bobo, we've heard from T-Rod, we've heard from Muschamp. We'll get sort of a latest from Muschamp, his thoughts after the pads have been on. South Carolina doesn't practice tomorrow, film review, stuff like that. What are you wanting to hear from Muschamp? What are you wanting to maybe learn tomorrow that maybe did not get covered last week or that is new as far as the progression? I tend to think one thing we haven't talked about enough is the various competitions on the offensive line.
That's one that I was going to mention. So my answer was going to be if there's anything that he says about how the quarterback battle is going, my guess is we won't get a ton of insight into that. I think even if we went through a day where, one quarterback threw, 3 touchdowns and the other one threw 3 picks, I don't think Will Muschamp's going to get on the podium and say, hey guys, this guy's way out in front of the quarterback competition. Don't think that's going to happen. Offensive line configurations, definitely something that I'm interested in. Any playmakers that he mentions, doesn't matter what position, running back, tight end, wide receiver, explosive plays, anybody he mentions that, hey, this guy had a really good day today making plays, I think that's something to really watch for because it's such a question offensively. Defensively, I think if there's just any separation with any of the defensive tackles, again, last time, I think first 2 names out of his mouth, if I'm not mistaken, were Jabari Ellis and Keir Thomas. But does he talk about Rick Sanders? Does he talk about Zach Pickens any? And is there any update maybe on the secondary? Something we reported this morning, Wes, was we talked about Israel McQuamu and what his role may be this season. He could certainly do several different things, but will he remain at corner? How much safety does he play? So just any talk about the secondary, I think is really interesting in terms of are there any different configurations that they're looking at or any updates there?
Yeah, and I think with offensive line, there, whenever you haven't heard from the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator for a while, there's questions everywhere, as far as and I mean literal questions, like the media is just throwing question after question after question. So last week, I feel like there were some things, specifically the offensive line, that just never really got touched on much. And so I think this week, hearing from Muschamp, stuff like that, will be interesting to see if those things get hit on. And what's happening at center? That's a spot. What's happening inside? I'm still curious to see, can a Jalen Nichols, who they've talked about cross-training a bit more at guard, to me, the guy just looks like he has everything you look for in a really good SEC guard. Can he make some noise there? Because the one thing, Chris, about losing like a Jordan Rhodes to the opt-out is that I think Jordan Rhodes had a chance to start, but even if he didn't, he was going to be a huge part of the rotation, right? I think at the very least, Jordan Rhodes was probably going to be like that 6th guy that would have come in first off the bench. So that opens up, one, you have to do more cross-training with some guys like Jalen Nichols, maybe Ja'Kai Moore, but it opens it up to, even a Vershawn Lee, I think, who's a versatile kid that can do some different things. If Nichols is having to work more inside at guard just to get that position down, does that open something up, for one of the other guys at tackle to sort of be the next tackle in line? There's a lot of different configurations. Now, the good part about it, Chris, is that we've seen Eric Wolford take this position, and it's gradually gotten better and better as far as having the number of, I would say it like this, the number of guys that look like you want them to look for SEC athleticism, SEC size at that position. So there are options, and I think we have a decent feel for some of the guys who you can circle and lock in. My question about that position, Chris, would be, is there that guy who has stepped up and the word just hasn't trickled out yet, that has said, I'm playing this year, y'all got to find a spot for me? Because there's always across a football team, there's always a couple of guys that maybe you get a little bit more out of than you're expecting. And I think this year more than ever, we may not hear about them as early as we would have in the past.
Yeah, you're right. Now, so one thing going into this, into the preseason, I'll say, is we heard, hey, the staff feels like Jason Turnetine can take a step forward and maybe go win this left tackle job. And that's sort of played out. But you're right in that aside from that, there's enough talent on this team to where somebody can step up and say, hey, I need to play. Now, it'll be interesting to see where that is. So the obvious spot would be center, right? Is one of Eric Douglas, Hank Manos, or Vinnie Murphy going to say, this is my job, I'm taking it, I'm the best guy by far, and it's not even a question? Or is it something like Ja'Kai Moore or Jalen Nichols, if they play inside some, played so well that you feel like you got to move somebody else around? That's a possibility too. Or is it one of those guys plays so well at tackle that even Jason Turnetine, who some people think going to be the number one guy, certainly has taken number one reps. Does that slow down that train a little bit? So you're right. They put together a group that has some depth. There's still some questions there, especially at center, but they have some options, which is good. They have, 4 guys outside now at tackle that they feel good about. They've got some options at guard, and they can move some pieces around. And when you look just generally at what Eric Wolford has, he's brought in some guys that, like you said, off the bus, they look good. When you roll up and you got Dylan Wadham and Jason Turnetine and Jalen Nichols and Ja'Kai Moore and some of these guys, they look like SEC offensive linemen. Hey, Wes, can I roll one thing real quick? We mentioned earlier Ala Diaz.
If it involves Italian food.
It does involve Italian food. So Adam actually just texted me with an awesome deal, right? So we mentioned Ala Diaz and Irmo in Lexington. Look them up if you haven't seen them. Incredible food. We go there all the time. It's our favorite place. Adam has offered up a special deal for our listeners. Anybody who takes advantage of our 60-day free trial at the bottom today gets a $20 gift card to Ala Diaz for free. So I'll hook that up. If you join, I'll see that you join later today. You just use the promo code GC60. I'll go back tomorrow so I can see the total for today and tonight, and I'll be in touch with you. I always email all our new subscribers anyway personally, and I'll tell you, grab some information from you, and we'll make sure you get a $20 gift card to Ala Diaz for some awesome Italian grubs. If that sounds good, Italian food, 60 days free of Gamecock Central and $20 free to Ala Diaz is just about a no-brainer to me. Just me personally. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, you've had Ala Diaz.
I have definitely had Ala Diaz.
Yeah.
Dude, that's
heck of a deal.
Awesome. And by the way, you see it right there, aladiaz.com. Okay, so guys, you heard it, and that was on the fly, by the way. That came together completely on the fly. But if you want some great Italian food and you want great Gamecock football coverage, then there you have it. So hit the 60-day free trial and then get some Italian food for it. So as Chris said, and just to do this, just go to GamecockCentral.com and click through to subscribe. And then if you put that, there's a little box that says promo code. So put in GC60 right there. It'll get you hooked up, and we will be able to see. We'll instantly find out. We'll be able to go and see who signed up. And once you do that, you get some free Italian. We'll mail it out to you. We'll get it to you. So appreciate that, Adam. That's awesome. And I'll look for my gift card in the mail too. But no, so yeah, that's awesome. Ala Diaz, check them out. Great food. And let's see, we got time for a couple more things, Chris. And Graham here on YouTube. You were right, Graham. And we did definitely admit that you were right. Graham here had asked about Luke Doty, and it really wasn't that much long. What was it, a week later, Chris? When I called you, I was like, man, I think Luke Doty's working at receiver. And I was like, that guy on YouTube is going to be right, and we're going to look like idiots.
Yeah,
so So Graham here asked us a while back, hey, is Luke Doty going to play some receiver? And we kind of downplayed it and said, I think he's focused on quarterback. So, yeah, you were right, Graham. Now, I will say this. It sounds – the way Bobo talked last week, it sounded like he wants Luke to focus, a little bit more on quarterback maybe than receiver, and then they're going to put in some packages for him at receiver. So we'll sort of see how that plays out. But, yeah, 100%, Graham, you were right. We had a question earlier I also want to get to that was good if I can find it. And this person said that we were awesome, so that pretty much guarantees that you get your question talked about. Chris, have you read much or heard much as far as what bowls will look like? Are bowls going to happen? I mean, college football, we do know college football playoff came out, and put out their dates for when they're going to put out their rankings. They're moving forward, which I think we already kind of knew that. So they're moving forward. But what do you think about the other bowls, man? I think this is one of those things. No, I don't want to say nobody cares about bowls. That's probably an exaggeration.
Right.
But nobody has been talking about this. Chris, I think this, like, COVID could put some bowls away. I feel not just for this year. Like, I think this could potentially eliminate some bowls in the future. But here's the thing, man. You can't even – the number of bowls they had right now, it was already too many. Yeah. There's not even enough teams playing to – like, does every team – does every team get a bowl?
So to answer the question, we don't totally know yet. By the way, Gamecock 1978, you are also awesome. Appreciate it. So we don't know yet exactly how they're going to handle it. There's a couple different things. The big change that they made going into this year, when we thought this was going to be a regular year, 2020 for college football, is that they dropped the number of teams that you could count towards bowl eligibility, so you could play 2 FCS teams. Normally, if you played 2 FCS teams, you beat both of them, you can only count one of those. Right now, you can count 2. Well, sort of throw that out the window because it doesn't matter, and teams are playing conference only for the most part anyways. ACC, for example, is a +1. Clemson's playing Citadel. But that won't really matter. So someone did go on record with one of the bowl organizations saying that, basically with the 10-game schedule, getting, 5 and 5 is pretty much automatically going to be bowl eligible, or, that's what it is. But they haven't said for sure. Also, like you said, Wes, there's too many bowls. I think at one point, I think there were like 41 bowl spots. So that's 82 teams. There's not even that many teams playing. What do we do? I don't know. So to answer the question, still sort of up in the air. My guess is your baseline right now is think 5-5, you're making a bowl. But if they decide to keep the other bowls, maybe you drop it down and say if you win 4 games, you make a bowl. I don't really know. And then all the math has to work out. So, and a bunch of teams aren't even playing college football this fall. So, again, some questions that are still out there.
Well, I think at this point, man, the bowls basically almost just become like a tournament. Not a tournament, but just you pick an SEC, an ACC, a Big 12. You just sort of match them up, and you almost if things are in a good place in the United States as far as COVID goes and everything's under control, you almost just throw every team in a bowl, man. It's like, and
yeah.
And here's I got an idea.
Okay.
If Clemson does not make the college football playoff, then if I'm a bowl, South Carolina, Clemson, bowl game, and you save the rivalry. You actually have played the game. That's the only way that this streak will not end, will be if somehow, because generally that would never happen. But with basically the rule book being thrown out and the fact that you could sort of just pick any team potentially, that who knows, maybe it could happen.
Yeah, you're right, man. I mean, it's a great idea because, I mean, normally you've got all these conference pairings, right? Well, those are out, so how are they going to pick bowl teams? The only thing we know about bowls is the college football playoff, as of late, are saying we're a go. We know we're going to have conference championships. This is all pending, the season doesn't get shut down in the middle of it or whatever. We're going to have conference championships for the big conferences that are playing, and we're going to have the college football playoff. There's still some questions about even those. Are they any different, and what do those look like? But we just don't know the bowl situation. So you're right. I mean, how are these bowls going to pick? Are any eliminated, or is the threshold lowered? Yeah, probably so on all of those, I would think.
Yeah, all right. So in a few months, when South Carolina and Clemson are playing in a bowl game, y'all better remember you heard it here first. Yeah, Tyler's Baloo says preseason poll has Gaffney number 1, led by Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Hey, Tyler's, if you have any scoop up that way, shoot us an email. Let us know what you're hearing on Big TID. Hit me at wes@GamecockCentral.com, man. Bill on Periscope wants to know if we've heard about Joe Anderson. That was 3 different Joe Anderson questions today. We're about to go off the air here, but if you go back, this will automatically be archived on YouTube. All of our stuff will be on YouTube. So basically, you can go back and watch it from the beginning and get the complete answer on what we've heard on Joe Anderson and sort of the defensive line of that depth chart. Chris, you want to tell them about this Aladia's deal again real quick?
Yeah, man. So we partnered up today on the fly with Aladia's, our buddy Adam, who's on the chat right now via Facebook. We really appreciate him. I gotten to know Adam, great dude, and he is the owner of Aladia's, which it has locations in Irmo and Lexington, and is probably my favorite spot to eat for my wife and I. Today only, if you join GamecockCentral.com on our 60-day free trial, you get also a $20 gift card to use at your discretion at either of the Aladia's locations. Just go to GamecockCentral.com, top right-hand corner, click subscribe, put in code GC60. That'll get your first 60 days of Gamecock Central totally free to check us out and all the work that we put out daily. And then I'll be in touch afterwards. We'll make sure we get you hooked up with your $20 gift card to Aladia's. Highly recommended. So, man, everyone who tuned in is in luck today. Lots of free stuff being given out.
Yeah, you got a great deal there, and that's cool. That's awesome. I'm glad that worked out. So, all right, Chris, any final football thoughts?
Man, I'm just every day that passes in football is closer to the season. So for me, when I wake up, I just want to see A, that people are staying healthy, and B, that we can continue moving towards football. So that's the biggest storyline for me. But beyond that, just curious to see once the scrimmages start, get going and everything. Can this offense find some playmakers? Can some guys step up? Can the team stay healthy? I think those are the 2 biggest questions, really, aside from the season itself going into this season. So we'll have our ear to the ground on all that at GamecockCentral.com for sure.
Yep. So mark your schedules. Players talk tomorrow on Wednesday. Will Muschamp will talk, so we'll have everything from that. We'll probably hop on the live at some point in the afternoon as well, just to talk about what new things we've learned as well. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We've probably gotten more YouTube subscribers in the last 2 weeks than we did in the last 2 months prior to that. So we appreciate the support. Hopefully y'all are liking the video content as well. And as long as y'all keep watching it, we're going to keep on providing it. So for Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see you next time here on the Gamecock Central YouTube and on GamecockCentral.com.